Sophia and I had been married for 10 years, and our 3 children were well-behaved and adorable, until I found that the contact labeled husband in her phone wasn't me. The DNA report tore my life apart. Not one of the 3 children carried my blood. I smiled as I turned the paternity test into a framed picture in the living room, and when Sophia screamed, I covered her mouth. Don't scare the kids. Her lover is a celebrity doctor at a private hospital? Perfect. Finally, watching her and the 3 bastards beg on the street, I set fire to the family portrait. The floor lamp Sophia snagged from IKEA in the living room cast the same mellow light as always, bathing the off-white sofa cover in a warm yellow. The digital clock on the wall silently ticked, 22:17. The air held the faint, overwarmed scent of food kept too long, and a trace of cloying perfume, not the one Sophia usually wore. Ethan leaned against the back of the sofa, unconsciously twisting the cold plastic casing of the remote between my fingers. On the TV screen, the leads of an urban melodrama were having a hysterical argument. Their voices were loud, but not a single word reached my ears. Water clattered in the kitchen as Sophia washed the dishes after the kids' dinner. Oliver's math workbook lay open on the coffee table, a geometry problem crisscrossed with construction lines. Emma's pink ballet shoes were casually tossed on the entryway rug. Noah's Legos scattered across the floor, a tiny blue robot piece rolling up against my slipper. 10 years of marriage, 3 children, a middle-class family that would seem complete to an outsider. I'm a department manager at a mid-sized building materials company. Sophia works as an attendant at a children's picture book library. Days ticked by like a wound-up clock, precise and monotonous. Mortgage, car loan, tutoring fees, extracurricular classes, the heavy weight of life smoothed off every edge and drained away those things called passion. How long has it been since we had a proper conversation? When was the last time we were intimate? The memory is fogged over like it's covered in a thick layer of condensation. The sound of water stopped. Sophia came out of the kitchen drying her hands, still wearing the apron printed with little yellow ducks, wet bangs clinging to her smooth forehead. She glanced at me, her look sweeping over me like over a familiar piece of furniture, then walked straight to the other end of the sofa, picked up her phone, and her fingers flew across the screen. The light from the screen reflected on her face. The slight smile at the corner of her mouth carried a gentleness and sweetness. Something I hadn't seen in a long time, even bordering on unfamiliar. A very faint, icy prick, without any warning, stabbed into my chest. That expression didn't belong to this home, didn't belong to this moment. Who is it so late? I tried to make my voice sound casual, but my eyes didn't leave her face. Sophia's fingers paused, and that smile vanished in an instant, as quickly as a mirage. She looked up, her eyes showing a touch of irritated disturbance. A parent from the picture book library, asking something. Her tone was flat, even a little sharp. "Oh," I replied, but my gaze stuck to the fingers holding her phone. Those fingers, damp with moisture, looked especially fair. A parent? What kind of parent would contact her at this hour? What kind of message could make her show that expression? Once doubt takes root, it wraps around like a vine. That faint trace of unfamiliar perfume stubbornly invaded my nostrils again. It wasn't hers. Definitely not. I watched her stand, place the phone face down on the coffee table, and walk toward the bathroom. The phone's black back looked like a silent, secret-filled eye, lying there quietly. My heart inexplicably skipped a few beats. A voice screamed sharply in my head. "Just look. Just take a look." Reason tugged at her. That was her privacy. But another, more primal and surging emotion, a panic at being deceived and mocked, instantly drowned out that pathetic moral sense. The bathroom door shut, and the water roared. I almost lunged forward. My fingers trembled with nerves as I snatched up the phone that still held her body heat. The screen lit up, fingerprint lock. I took a deep breath and tried pressing my thumb. It opened. She had never changed the lock screen password. It was the digits of our wedding anniversary. How ironic. The green icon for the social app sat in the most prominent position. I tapped it. The pinned chat had only one note: home. That was me. Right below it, the next chat's note glaringly read: husband. Husband? A chill shot up from the soles of my feet to the crown of my head. My blood seemed to freeze instantly. The chat box beside my profile picture, labeled home, was as quiet as a tombstone. Under the glaring husband label, the last message had been sent 10 minutes earlier, an ambiguous kissing emoji. My fingertips went numb as I opened that conversation. The light from the screen stung my eyes. The chat history was like a series of poisoned daggers, stabbing hard into my vision. Sophia, I really wish I could hold you in my arms right now. Sent at 3:30 this afternoon, exactly when she was supposed to be working at the picture book library. Baby, are you being good today? Did you miss Daddy? Sent at 6 o'clock yesterday evening, when I was still working overtime at the office. A photo popped up. Sophia wearing a sexy lace nightgown I had never seen before, the hotel room's suggestive lighting in the background. The date was last Saturday. She had told me she went back to her parents' home. The surgery went very well, don't worry. When I get back, I'll take good care of you. Sent 1 week ago. The profile picture of the husband was a waist-up shot of a man in a white coat, wearing gold-rimmed glasses, his smile gentle and refined, exuding professional confidence. I have seen this face. It was in Sophia's phone album, tucked among a bunch of family photos. She had brushed it off at the time, saying, "Oh, a friend, a doctor, pretty impressive." A friend? A husband? The world spun, warped, and collapsed before my eyes. The off-white sofa, the warm yellow light, scattered Legos, the children's smiling faces, everything familiar, everything I had relied on, shattered into powder in an instant, revealing the terrifying, cold abyss beneath. Nausea churned in my stomach, my throat tightened. I clamped my hand over my mouth to keep from vomiting. A buzzing filled my ears, blood slammed at my temples, roaring like a war drum. The water in the bathroom kept running, splashing on and on like a relentless, mocking downpour. "Ethan, why are you holding my phone?" Sophia's voice, tinged with the languor of someone who just showered and a barely perceptible alertness, came from the bathroom doorway. I jerked my head up. The phone screen was still lit. The glaring contact name, husband, and the suggestive chat logs burned on my retinas like a red-hot branding iron. Blood seemed to rush to my face and then vanish, leaving only a cold numbness. I looked at her, hair dripping down her shoulders, wrapped in a bathrobe, cheeks still flushed from steam. That flush, to me in that moment, looked like the lingering tide of an affair. "You." She saw the phone in my hand and the expression on my face. Her languor vanished in an instant, replaced by a flicker of panic, and her voice rose a few tones. "You went through my phone? Who is this, husband?" My voice was so dry it felt like sandpaper grinding. Every word carried a raw, biting edge. I turned the phone screen toward her. That contact name and the final kissing emoji were laid bare under the light. Sophia's face drained white in a flash, all color wiped clean. She instinctively took half a step back, her lips trembling. You let me explain. It's not what you think. See, that's our director. He was joking. The note was written randomly. Really? Joking? I tugged at the corner of my mouth, trying to laugh, but only producing a choking sound. Wearing lace nightwear in a hotel and joking? Calling him husband was a joke? Asking if the kids are good and if they miss their dad was a joke? My voice shot up, a dying beast's roar, exploding through the quiet living room. "Sophia, do you fucking think Ethan is an idiot?" The loud noise startled the bedroom. The eldest, Oliver, opened his door a crack, rubbed his eyes, and timidly peeked out. "Dad? Mom? Are you fighting?" "It's nothing. Oliver, be good. Go back to sleep." Sophia instantly switched to a forced, calm, gentle tone and called to their son, though her eyes were fixed on me, pleading. I looked at the boy's face, inheriting Sophia's delicate features. Does he look like me? Does he? That thought slithered into my mind like a venomous snake, instantly occupying all my reason. Oliver? Emma? Noah? Those three names now felt like three red-hot iron rods, stabbing viciously into my heart. 10 years. A full 10 years. I've been a fool, raising someone else's seed, raising someone else's wife. Ethan, calm down. Sophia lowered her voice, trembling with tears. We'll talk about it tomorrow. Don't scare the children. Children? I repeated the word, my voice as light as a sigh, but carrying a chill that made Sophia shiver all over. I looked at her, my gaze sweeping over her panicked face before returning to the avatar on her phone. A person in a white coat wearing gold-rimmed glasses. Victor, the quite impressive friend Sophia had mentioned, the star surgeon at the city's expensive private St. Heart Hospital. So that's it. A sanctimonious elite doctor and an apparently virtuous, family-oriented mother. What a matching pair of scoundrels. All right, very well. I nodded, the muscles in my face twitching stiffly as I forced a smile more hideous than crying. I slapped her phone down onto the coffee table with a heavy thud. Without looking at her again, I turned and walked into the study, locking the door behind me. The door shut out Sophia's suppressed sobs and banging, and it shut out that false world outside. The study was deathly silent. I leaned against the cold door, my body trembling beyond my control. Rage flowed through me like molten rock, burning every nerve, but deeper still was a drowning, utterly hollow coldness and absurdity. 10 years of marriage, 3 children, the foundation of my entire life. It had all been a mirage built on quicksand. A complete, utter joke. No, I can't lose my mind. I can't just let this go. A voice screamed in the depths of my heart. I need proof. Ironclad proof. Proof that will tear Sophia's hypocritical face off and drag that sanctimonious Dr. Victor through the mud. My gaze fell on the desk drawer. Inside were photocopies of the children's birth certificates. With trembling hands, I opened the drawer and pulled out those 3 thin sheets. Oliver, Emma, Noah. 3 names, 3 dates. My eyes fixed on the father column. Ethan. How glaring those 3 letters were. Could the blood that flowed under those 3 letters really be my Ethan's? Once the thought crystallized, there was no more hesitation in my actions. I took out my phone. The screen's light reflected my twisted face in the dark. I searched for reputable institutions in the city that do paternity tests. My fingertips were cold as they swiped the screen. A testing center with a name that looked official and reliable popped up. I dialed the number, my voice unnaturally calm, even carrying a cruelty that felt strange to myself. Hello? Is this the XX Paternity Testing Center? I need expedited paternity tests. Yes, for 3 children's samples. Early tomorrow, I will bring all the required samples over. The results? The sooner the better. Expedited fees are not an issue. After hanging up, I collapsed into the chair at the desk. In the dark, only the faint glow of the phone screen remained. Sophia was still outside, futilely knocking on the door, her voice choked with sobs and fear. Ethan, open the door. Let's talk. It's not like that. Listen to my explanation. Explain? I smile without sound. Explain how you spent my money, lived in my house. Let me support you and your lover's bastard. Explain how that Dr. Victor can save lives at the operating table and then climb into my wife's bed off it. The city lights outside glittered, reflected in my hollow pupils, but only cast back a cold, vengeful undertone. Evidence will come soon. Sophia, Victor, what you owe me I will collect, principal and interest, item by item, in the most painful way. Dawn was just breaking. Gray-white light cut cold lines across the floor through the study's blinds. I hadn't slept all night. My sockets hollow. My bloodshot eyes showed no trace of fatigue, only an almost substantial coldness and clarity. The sound of Sophia knocking had long since stopped. Probably she'd fallen asleep curled up on the living room sofa, or gone to find her husband for comfort. It didn't matter. The living room was quiet. I moved out like a ghost, soundless. The air still held the tension of last night. Scanning the sofa, Sophia was indeed not there. The master bedroom door was closed tight. Better this way. My objective was clear. I entered the children's room. The oldest, Oliver, slept deeply, letting out a soft snore. I stood at the bedside, using the faint light to stare at his sleeping face. This face, which had once filled me with pride and looked so much like Sophia, now seemed to mock my foolishness in every line. I reached out, my movement light as a feather, and carefully and precisely plucked a few hairs with fresh follicles from the roots of his thick black hair. He didn't wake, only frowning in discomfort and turning over. I put the hairs into the sealed little bags marked with names that I had prepared long ago. Repeat the same method. I walked into the second child, Emma's pink princess room. She was clutching a plush rabbit, her little mouth puckered slightly. My heart, in that instant, seemed to be violently clenched by something, a sharp pain spreading through me. This is my Emma, that little angel who sweetly calls me daddy, who tiptoes to dance for me. But the next second, that sharp pain was overwhelmed by an even fiercer hatred and cold determination. Fake. It's all fake. I trembled as I took a strand of her hair the same way. Last was the third child, Noah. He slept the worst, his blanket kicked off halfway. I took a sample from him as well. Next was mine. I went into the bathroom, stared into the mirror, expressionless, plucked a few strands of my own hair, and put them into another bag labeled Father. Throughout the whole process, my hand was frighteningly steady, without a tremor. The face reflected in the mirror was pale and haggard, but the eyes were like blades forged in ice, frighteningly sharp. After finishing, I carefully tucked the 4 sealed bags into the inner pocket of my coat, pressed against my chest. There, my heart beat in a heavy, slow rhythm, each beat feeling like a countdown to the impending judgment. I gently opened the front door, then gently closed it. The morning's cold air hit my face, carrying the stale smell of the city before it wakes. I didn't look back at the place that had once been called home. The testing center was located in an inconspicuous office building in the west of the city. The receptionist wore a professional smile. I handed over the samples, my voice low and steady. Rush. 3 children, 1 potential father. When can I get the results at the earliest? If rushed, we can usually produce an electronic report in 24 to 48 hours. The receptionist checked the system. The fee is card. I handed over my credit card without hesitation. The numbers on the screen flicked up, an amount that would sting a normal family's budget. But right now to me, it was merely a necessary expense for a ticket through the gates of hell. Every minute of waiting felt as long as a century. I sat on the testing center's cold metal bench, not looking at my phone, only staring at the stark white wall opposite. An abstract painting hung there, twisted lines and color blocks tangled together, much like my own mind, chaotic yet painfully clear. Anger, humiliation, and betrayal coiled like poisonous vines, tightening around my heart until I almost suffocated. Beneath that suffocating pain, however, a cold, destructive force was raging and growing. It was hatred for Sophia, hatred for the Victor I had never met, and even more a hatred for the 3 children who had claimed 10 years of my life and all my emotions. They were the greatest blot on my life, living pillars of shame. The phone vibrated, the company assistant calling. Mr. Johnson, there's a department meeting at 10 this morning. Taking leave. Family emergency. I cut in tersely, my voice flat, then hung up. Work? What job could possibly matter now compared with the personal farce I was about to expose? Time flowed in dead silence. At last, on the afternoon of the next day, near dusk, the phone screen lit up. An unfamiliar landline number, followed by the words XX Parentage Testing Center. Here we go. I pressed the answer key and held the phone tight to my ear. My heart hammered in my chest, striking my ribs with a dull echo. Blood seemed to rush to my head. My ears buzzed. Hello, is this Mr. Ethan? A formulaic female voice came through the phone. This is he. My voice was very dry. Your expedited paternity test results are ready. The electronic report has been sent to the email address you provided. According to the test results, the samples from the 3 children you submitted do not match your paternal DNA marker loci in accordance with Mendelian inheritance laws. I couldn't hear the rest. It was as if a massive bomb had been detonated in my head. A thunderous blast that made the whole world spin and collapse. Only those few cold words kept reverberating over and over. All do not conform to Mendelian genetic laws. None of them conform. All. Mr. Johnson? Mr. Johnson, are you listening? The woman's voice on the other end of the line held a hint of puzzlement. Here, I heard my own voice, sounding distant and unlike my own, carrying a strange calm, even a hint of eerie relief. Thank you. I understand. I hung up. The world became completely silent. The sunset outside was straining to burn its last light, dyeing the sky a desolate blood red. That red light poured through the window glass, splashing onto my face and body like a layer of viscous plasma. I slowly spread my lips and laughed soundlessly. My shoulders began to tremble, the movements growing larger until they turned into an uncontrollable, voiceless, hysterical laugh. Tears, however, surged out without warning, scorching as they slid down my cold cheeks and landed on the back of the hand holding the phone. 10 years. 3 children. A carefully woven, interminable deception. Ironclad evidence. Sophia. Victor. You too, you pair of scoundrels. You stole my life, stole my 10 years. You made me look like a complete fool, holding someone else's bastard in my hands and treating him like a treasure. The laughter slowly ceased. The tears dried on my face, leaving taut traces. The last bit of warmth that belonged to Ethan in my eyes was completely extinguished, leaving only boundless, bone-chilling darkness and a fire of destruction burning madly. The show has only just begun. Are you ready? The blood-red sunset sank completely below the horizon, leaving only the cold neon of the city flickering silently outside the window. I sat in the car with the lights off, letting the darkness swallow me. The phone screen glowed faintly, and the PDF from the testing center in my inbox lay there quietly, like a Pandora's box. My finger hovered above the screen, trembling slightly. In the end, I still tapped it. The report opened. Technical terms densely packed, charts complex. But my eyes skimmed past all the buildup like a precision missile, locking onto those last few cold lines of conclusion. Sample 1, Oliver, and Ethan, alleged father, have a cumulative parentage index, CPI, of 0.0000 and a parentage probability, RCP, of 0.0000%. The results do not support Ethan being Oliver's biological father. Sample 2, Emma, and Ethan, alleged father, have a cumulative parentage index, CPI, of 0.0000 and a parentage probability, RCP, of 0.0000%. The results do not support Ethan being Emma's biological father. Sample 3, Noah, and Ethan, the alleged father, have a cumulative parentage index, CPI, of 0.0000 and a parentage probability, RCP, of 0.0000%. The results do not support Ethan being Noah's biological father. 30.0000%. 30.0000%. Like 3 bullets, precise and merciless, they pierced the last shred of my hope. Heh! A very light, cold laugh, as if from the depths of a 9-fold abyss, escaped from deep in my throat. I turned off the phone screen, and darkness fell again. In the dark, the corners of my mouth spread wider and wider, a silent, ferocious grin spreading across my face. In that moment, all the pain, collapse, and despair were replaced by something purer and darker. A vengeance fire ignited to burn everything down. I started the car. The engine gave a low roar. I didn't go home, but drove straight to a 24-hour copy and print shop downtown. The store's bright incandescent lights were a bit harsh. The clerk was a young guy, yawning. "Sir, printing or photocopying?" I handed over my phone and pulled up the last page of the appraisal report. Those 3 glaring lines of conclusion were clearly enlarged on the screen. This, my voice was calm and even. Use the best coated paper, the highest quality color print. Enlarge it. Make it the size of a poster. I indicated a roughly 1 meter by ½ meter size with my hands. The young man leaned in to look at the screen. When he saw the content, his expression immediately turned very strange. His eyes filled with astonishment and a faint, barely noticeable disdain. He shot me a quick glance, probably trying to read something from my face, but found only a dull, dead calm. Sir, are you sure you want to print this? He hesitated, stammering. Yes. My tone left no room for negotiation. Money's not the issue. Make it eye-catching. I deliberately emphasized the last 3 words. The young man swallowed, dared not ask more, and his fingers trembled slightly as he worked on the computer. The high-precision large-format printer began to operate, emitting a monotonous hum. I leaned against the cold counter and waited patiently. Time passed by the second. The printer's hum felt like the background noise of some evil ritual. At last, the machine stopped. The young man carefully pulled out a huge, smooth, crisp sheet of coated paper from the output tray. The 3 lines of black conclusions, blown up many times against the pure white background, made each 0.0000% look like a sneering ghost eye, carrying an overwhelming visual impact, coldly announcing the utter death of a family. At the top, I had even asked him to bold the title, Parentage Test Report. Sir, here you go. The young man handed me the rolled poster, his eyes darting away as if what I held were the source of a plague. I paid, took the heavy roll of paper. The tube was cold, yet felt as if it carried searing heat, burning my palm. Stepping out of the print shop, the night wind bit at my face. I looked up at the night sky, stained dark red by the city's lights, and took a long, deep breath. The air was thick with exhaust and dust. Back downstairs at the place once called home. Looking up, the living room window was lit, a dim yellow like a dying wound. Sophia should be inside, and those 3 little bastards. What are they doing now? Eating? Watching TV? Enjoying the false peace built from my blood and sweat? A cold curve tugged at the corner of my mouth again. The show was about to begin. The key slid into the keyhole and turned. The sound of the door opening startled those inside. The entryway light came on, and Sophia's figure appeared at the living room entrance. She was in loungewear, drawn and pale, her eyes swollen and red. Clearly, she hadn't slept well the last couple of days. When she saw me, a complex expression flickered across her face for an instant. Fear, guilt, and a faint glimmer of hope. Ethan, you're back. Her voice was cautious and probing, her body tensing slightly, like a frightened rabbit. I didn't look at her or change my shoes. I walked straight into the living room. My gaze swept across the room. At the dining table, the 3 children were holding bowls and eating. Oliver glanced up at me and said, Dad, his eyes avoiding mine. Emma timidly kept her head down, picking at the grains of rice in her bowl. Little Noah, clueless, saw me and grinned, rice bit stuck to his mouth. What a warm scene. Too bad it's all fake. Fake. I walked to the most conspicuous wall in the living room. A huge family oil portrait used to hang there. One we had commissioned for Sophia and me on our 5th wedding anniversary, and we were beaming with happiness, the 3 children gathered at our knees. At this moment, that painting was the most vicious mockery in my eyes. I reached out expressionlessly, grabbed the edge of the frame, and yanked hard. Crash! The heavy frame hit the floor with a thunderous sound. The glass shattered and sprayed everywhere. The children were terrified and screamed. Emma burst into tears with a wail. Ethan, are you out of your mind? Sophia screamed, rushing over to try to stop me. I covered my ears and didn't even look at her. I bent down, picked up the frameless oil painting that had fallen to the floor, and tossed it into the corner. Then I unfurled the large sheet of coated copperplate poster paper in my hands. What were you holding? Sophia's voice began to tremble, carrying a sense of foreboding. I didn't answer. Carefully, almost reverently, I pasted the poster bearing the cold appraisal results where the family portrait had hung. The smooth, coated surface reflected the ceiling light, illuminating those three huge black lines of verdict so clearly. Every number, every symbol, emanating a suffocating chill. Done. I stepped back and regarded my masterpiece, as if admiring a peerless work of art. The cold, twisted pleasure surged up in me with a clarity I'd never felt before. Sophia's gaze finally focused on the poster. When her eyes landed on the enormous 0.0000% and she read those 3 lines of conclusions, her pupils suddenly contracted to the utmost. The color drained from her face in an instant, leaving her paper white. Her body shook violently, as if struck by an invisible sledgehammer, and a short, sharp, utterly inhuman gasp escaped her throat, as though she would suffocate the next second. Extreme fear and despair overwhelmed her in a flash. Ah! The next second, a piercing scream erupted from deep in her throat, shattering the air. It was heart-rending. She lunged at the poster like a madwoman, tearing at it with both hands, trying to pull it off the wall, trying to destroy this blood-stained evidence. No, impossible. It's fake. This is fake. Ethan, you forged this. You framed me. Ah! Her screams filled the living room, sharp enough to make one's scalp crawl. Emma was so frightened she cried even harder, and Oliver turned pale, standing there at a loss. Noah was completely stunned by the enormous noise. His little mouth puckered, and he began wailing loudly as well. The living room instantly became a chaotic, ear-splitting hell. Just as Sophia's fingernails were about to tear the poster and she was slipping into hysterical madness, I moved. I stepped in front of her in one stride, my motion as quick as lightning. I reached out with my left hand and clamped it over her screaming mouth. MMM. Her screams were forcibly choked back in her throat, turning into a muffled, painful whimper. She stared at me in terror, unable to believe it, her eyes full of pure fear, as if she were looking at a stranger, a demon crawled out of hell. My right hand, however, was extremely gentle, with a chilling calm, lightly sweeping aside the stray hair on her forehead that had come loose from her pulling. I brought my face close to hers, distorted by panic, my voice pressed very low, carrying a cold, venom-tongued tenderness. Shoo! I watched the violent trembling in her pupils, felt her futile struggles and burning tears under my palm, and the smile at the corner of my mouth deepened, cold and cruel. Don't make a sound. My voice was as soft as a lover's whisper, yet carried the weight of 1,000 hammers, striking hard at the frayed edges of her nerves. You'll scare our children. Under my hand, Sophia writhed like a fish out of water, struggling violently. Tears streamed down in torrents, soaking the back of my hand, hot and sticky. Her expression shifted from initial terror and despair to a sliver of mad hatred, staring at me as if she would tear me apart with her gaze. I let go of her hand, letting her collapse weakly to the floor, curling up, her shoulders convulsing violently as she emitted a suppressed, bestial whimper. The 3 children were already petrified, their cries stuck in their throats, reduced to nothing but frightened hiccups. I stood up straight, looking down from above at the wreckage on the floor, at the woman who had once been my wife, now like a rag utterly torn to pieces. Deep in the lake of my heart, a trace of vengeful pleasure spread slowly and clearly like cold poison. But that wasn't enough. Far from it. My gaze skimmed over Sophia's trembling body and landed on the family portrait oil painting in the corner of the living room, broken and dust-covered for being thrown. In the picture, the man in a white coat with gold-rimmed glasses and a gentle smile. Victor looked through the shattered glass with his sanctimonious eyes, affectionately watching his bastards. Victor, the star surgeon of Sacred Heart Hospital, Sophia's husband, the biological father of the 3 bastards. Good, very good. Sophia's breakdown was just an appetizer. Now it's your turn, Dr. Schmidt. I ignored the woman and children crying on the floor and walked straight into the study, locking the door. cut off from the chaos and wailing outside. Only the low hum of the computer tower remained in the room. I turned on the computer. The screen light washed over my expressionless face. My fingers flew across the keyboard. First, I needed to learn about Victor. His public information was not hard to find. On the Sacred Heart Hospital website, in the section introducing surgical specialists, his photo stood out beside a long list of shiny titles and academic achievements. I read carefully through his profile, adept at difficult, minimally invasive laparoscopic surgeries, especially skilled in hepatobiliary and pancreatic surgery, a high-level talent recruited by the hospital with a very full surgery schedule, the hospital's cash cow and flagship. Minimally invasive laparoscopy, precision instruments. I murmured those words, my gaze dark. Next, I needed to learn about his habits. I opened a well-known local medical forum and entered keywords like Victor, St. Heart Hospital, and doctor. Soon, some anonymous discussion threads popped up. Most were feedback from patients or family members. Dr. Schmidt is really skilled, but he's a bit arrogant and doesn't bother talking to people much. The pre-op consultation was very brief. He seemed a little impatient. He seems to rely particularly on his own custom instruments during surgery. I heard a nurse say once that Dr. Schmidt only uses the German XX brand, and he personally checks them several times before every operation to feel at ease. Yes, I've heard too. His instrument case is custom-made, different from everyone else's, very precious, and he keeps the key himself. They say it's because he has extremely high standards and won't tolerate the slightest deviation. A custom German XX brand instrument? He keeps the key himself? Extremely demanding. Won't tolerate the slightest deviation? A cold, precise, deadly, tempting thought, like a poisonous flower quietly blooming in the dark, vividly sprang into my mind. The corner of my mouth once again twitched upward uncontrollably, forming an exceedingly cruel arc. What he relies on is his fatal weakness. In the following days, I acted unusually calm. I didn't speak another word to Sophia, ignoring the looks in her eyes that oscillated between despair, resentment, and pleading. I treated those 3 children as if they were invisible. They skittered around me like frightened little animals, not daring to breathe, carefully circling me. The atmosphere at home was oppressively still, like the dead calm before a storm. Sophia tried to tear down that poster, but my cold stare pinned her to the spot. She didn't dare move. She could only allow that blood-stained verdict to hang day and night in the most conspicuous place in the living room, like an unhealing public execution scar. I continued to go to the office as usual, dealing with documents and meetings that had become utterly meaningless. No one knew that beneath the calm exterior my mind was working at high speed, like the most precise computer, simulating every detail. I needed access to Victor's exclusive instruments. St. Heart Hospital had strict management and rigorous sterilization and storage procedures for surgical instruments. But where there are people, there are loopholes. Through channels at the building materials company, I eventually got in touch with a small boss who did equipment maintenance in the hospital's logistics department. His name was Jackie Strong, in his 40s, had a bit of authority, and liked to gamble. A dinner that began with a chance encounter. A few drinks down, I accidentally mentioned my admiration for Dr. Victor's superb surgical skills, then shifted to musing that a top expert like Dr. Schmidt must use extraordinary surgical instruments. Absolutely. Jackie, feeling the alcohol, opened up. Dr. Schmidt's set of eating implements, TSK, German original import, custom-made. One set costs more than 10 years of my salary. Pricier than anything. The key is kept only by him and our veteran instrument guy, Walter, stored in a special safe, like it's for preventing theft. Every time they're used, sterilizing and cleaning is a separate procedure. Old Walter supervises personally and won't let anyone else touch them. Oh, that's strict. I feigned surprise and topped his glass again. So, if something urgent happens and the instruments need immediate handling, outsiders would have no chance at all? Jackie scoffed. a bit boastful and pleased from the drink. No lock can stop someone determined, right? That old Walter, he's nearing retirement and loves a drink. He often just tosses the key to that little instrument room in a drawer. But don't you go telling anyone this. He glanced at me warily. Don't worry, Jackie, we're just chatting for the fun of it. I smiled and toasted him again, then casually slipped a thick shopping cart into his pocket. A little something. Get the kids something to eat. Jackie pinched the card, a satisfied smile spreading across his face. His guard immediately dropped through the floor. The breakthrough was found. Old Walter's key. The equipment department storeroom key. Over the next few days, I prowled the perimeter of St. Hart Hospital like a ghost. I watched the staff traffic at the hospital's back entrance, especially the logistics corridor and the building that housed the equipment department. I even posed as a visiting relative and lingered briefly inside the hospital to learn which floor the equipment department was on and the general layout. Old Walter was a slightly overweight, graying man who walked a bit slowly. I noted that around 4:30 every afternoon he left the equipment department to steep tea in the lounge on the adjacent floor, staying away for a good half hour. That was the time window. The timing came quickly. I saw Victor's surgery schedule on the hospital's internal electronic bulletin board. I had glimpsed it while pretending to be a family member, using the Wi-Fi, a highly difficult laparoscopic pancreatiodectomy, scheduled as the first case on Tuesday morning next week. This was it. Monday afternoon, for 25. I wore a plain blue maintenance worker's uniform I bought online, a peak cap pulled low, and a mask. Carrying an inconspicuous toolbox, I calmly walked into the service corridor of Sacred Heart Hospital. There were few cameras here and a mix of staff. I kept my head down and walked at an unhurried pace straight to the floor where the instrument department was located. The hallway was very quiet. Most people had left for the day. When I reached the instrument department's door, there was a room next to it with a sign reading Equipment Maintenance Room, and the door was ajar. I sidled in. It was full of odds and ends and cleaning supplies. Through the crack in the door, I kept my eyes fixed on the instrument department's entrance. For 35, and sure enough, old Walter ambled out slowly, humming a little tune, holding his big tea mug, and walked toward the lounge at the end of the corridor. He closed the door behind him casually, but didn't lock it. I waited patiently for 2 minutes. After confirming the corridor was empty, I slipped out of the maintenance room, walked to the instrument department door, and gently pushed. The door opened. My heart beat steadily and powerfully in my chest, with not a trace of panic, only cold focus. I slipped inside and closed the door behind me. It was a small room, filled with various racks holding instrument packs, either awaiting sterilization or already sterilized. The air was thick with the smell of disinfectant. My gaze swept sharply across the room. Soon, on an independent metal cabinet against the wall, I spotted a conspicuous label, Victor Yi Sheng Zhanyong Qi Sheit. The cabinet door had both a combination lock and a keyhole. Where are the keys? I quickly scanned old Walter's desk. The surface was a mess. The middle drawer wasn't locked. I pulled it open, and under a pile of junk, there lay a bunch of keys. One of them had a small tag, V-Locker. This is it. I took the key, inserted it into the keyhole, and turned. A faint click sounded. I opened the cabinet door. Inside were several dark green, sealed instrument packs neatly arranged, each bearing Victor's name and the name of tomorrow's operation. I opened the kit. There were no wrenches or screwdrivers, only a few items. An extremely thin pair of latex gloves, a small bottle of colorless special lubricant, potent, and it evaporates quickly, leaving almost no trace, and a tiny, almost invisible sliver of metal. Something I had carefully ground off a discarded, very hard alloy drill bit using the construction company's cutting machine. Put on the gloves. I picked up the sealed bag labeled Laparoscopic Surgery Core Instrument Set. The bag was special made, with a one-time locking seal at the opening that's hard to restore once breached. But that didn't stop me. Using a specially made fine hook, also from the kit, I deftly picked open an inconspicuous plastic latch on the inside of the seal. The entire closure loosened. My movements were gentle and precise, leaving no signs of forced entry. I opened the instrument set. Inside were various cold-glinting, precisely shaped laparoscopic tools, dissectors, an electrocautery hook, graspers, scissors. Each piece was spotless and looked new, giving off a metallic chill. Victor's life depended on these small, precise components. My target was clear, the primary operating forceps. It's the key tool for dissecting tissue and clamping vessels. The joint's flexibility and bite force are critical. I picked it up and found a tiny gap at the joint connection near the jaws. Using tweezers, I lifted that grain of salt-sized metal fragment and very carefully, precisely, I wedged it into the deepest part of the joint gap. Then I dropped 2 drops of that special lubricant. The colorless, odorless liquid quickly seeped into the crevice, enveloping the lethal fragment and beginning to evaporate rapidly. After doing all that, I flexed the forceps joint very gently with my gloved fingers. Good, very smooth, no sticking at all. The fragment was perfectly concealed. Only during surgery, under prolonged, high-frequency, high-intensity use, when blood and tissue fluids wash away the lubricant, when repeated opening and closing create minute friction and heat, will this hidden seed, at some critical moment, cause an unforeseen, catastrophic outcome. The joint suddenly seizing and tearing a vessel, or poor contact during electrocautery causing an accidental burn. Any tiny failure deep in the abdominal cavity, beside vital organs, can be fatal. I carefully returned the instruments to their places, then used the thin hook needle to fasten the sealed plastic clip back on. From the outside, the sealed bag looked intact, as if no one had ever touched it. I closed the dedicated cabinet door and locked it. I put the key back under the clutter in old Walter's top drawer, trying to keep everything as it was. I erased all traces of having been inside. Finally, as I had when I came in, I slipped out of the equipment room without a sound and gently closed the door. The corridor was still quiet. Old Walter was still in the lounge drinking tea. I exited through the hospital's back door and blended into the flow of people on the street. The evening breeze brushed my face, carrying the warmth of early summer. I took off my hat and mask and took a deep breath. The air still seemed to hold the scent of disinfectant, mingled with a sort of metallic, rusty sweetness. I took out my phone and found the number labeled Dr. Victor, which I had copied from Sophia's phone. I composed a text, the tone as calm as if discussing the weather. Good luck with the surgery tomorrow, Dr. Schmidt. Hope everything goes smoothly. Sent. I looked up toward the surgery building of Sacred Heart Hospital, its windows alight in the dusk. A silent, cold, expectant snarl slowly tugged at the corner of my mouth. Victor, enjoy your farewell performance. Tuesday. Morning sunlight filtered through thin clouds, carrying a false cheerfulness. I sat in the company office, a dull report on the computer screen before me, but I couldn't read a single word. My fingers tapped the desktop unconsciously, making a monotonous clack-clack. The phone lay at hand, its screen black as a silent tombstone. Time had never moved so slowly. Every minute, every second felt like being seared in a vat of boiling oil. I forced myself not to imagine the scene inside the operating room at Sacred Heart Hospital, but my mind obsessively constructed images. The dazzling light of the surgical lamp, the faint clinking of cold surgical instruments, the monitor's steady, icy tick. And Victor, his hands in sterile gloves, gripping the forceps I had tampered with and reaching them into the patient's opened abdominal cavity. Is that tiny alloy fragment now silently lurking in the hinge of the forceps? Is the lubricant being washed away and diluted by warm blood and tissue fluid? When will it act? While separating which important vessel? Beside which fragile organ during dissection? Will a sudden jam tear a vessel? Or will a poor contact during cautery produce an unexpected spark and burn? Or worse? My heart pounded heavily in my chest. Each beat carried a nearly suffocating expectation and a grim exhilaration. Yes, exhilaration. It was a dark feeling, a mix of destructive desire and immense release, like ink spilling into clear water and quickly fouling the whole lake of the heart. I could even feel the muscles at the corner of my mouth twitch uncontrollably, as if suppressing a grin that was about to burst forth, fierce and grotesque. The internal phone on my desk suddenly rang. The piercing bell sliced through the dead silence like a knife. I flinched and almost lunged to grab the receiver. "Mr. Johnson, there's an urgent package for you at the front desk that requires your signature," the assistant's voice said in a formal, rehearsed tone. "Not the hospital." The taut nerves relaxed in an instant, replaced by a deeper agitation and a sense of emptiness. No, not emptiness. It was the impatience of a predator waiting for its prey to fall into the trap. "Leave it on my desk," I said hoarsely, then slammed the phone down. A package? Even the biggest deal in the world would have to step aside right now. Time continued to flow in torment. 9 o'clock, 10, 11, the operation should have started. That complex pancreatidoneectomy usually takes 5 to 8 hours. Now was the critical moment. Every minute could be the ticking countdown of Victor's life. The phone screen remained pitch black. I stood up and paced anxiously around the office. Outside the window, the city was bustling with traffic and hurried pedestrians. Everything as usual. No one knew that in some sterile room in this city, an accident I had orchestrated against an elite surgeon was playing out. That secret, life-and-death control over him felt like a drug, bringing twisted, intense shivers. 12:30 in the afternoon. The phone screen finally lit up. It wasn't a call. It was the headline of a news push from a local public account that follows medical incidents. Breaking. Surgical accident at Sacred Heart Hospital. Renowned surgeon Victor suddenly fell ill during surgery, his life hanging by a thread. Here we go. My finger trembled slightly with excitement as I tapped the push notification. The news was brief, written with the restraint and caution typical of reporting. Earlier this morning, an accident occurred during a complex laparoscopic operation at Sacred Heart Hospital. According to insiders, the chief surgeon and the hospital's renowned surgical expert Victor experienced a suspected sudden failure of a key operating instrument during the procedure, causing uncontrollable severe bleeding in the surgical area. Although on-site medical staff attempted rescue measures with all their might, Dr. Schmidt himself, due to his position during the operation, was unfortunately gravely affected, sustaining severe injuries. He is currently in the intensive care unit, ICU, receiving emergency treatment. His vital signs are extremely unstable, and his condition is critical. Relevant departments have launched an investigation into the specific cause of the incident. Suspected sudden failure. Severely affected. Life hanging by a thread. It worked. It really worked. An indescribable, enormous torrent, mixed with rapture and relief, suddenly broke through all my defenses. I clutched my phone so hard my knuckles went white, my body uncontrollably trembling. A string of suppressed, bellows like ha-ha sounds escaped my throat, premonitions of hysterical laughter. For a moment, the extreme excitement made my vision swim and darken. "Victor, you're finished. You're fucking finished. Weren't you supposed to be a brilliant surgeon? Weren't you a star doctor? Weren't you the kind of man who could steal someone else's wife and raise another child? And now, your scalpel, your pride, have become the death warrant that drags you to hell. Yes, fucking glorious. This feeling is 10,000 times better than a promotion, a raise, signing $1 million deal, or any so-called achievement in the past 10 years. At that moment, my personal phone began vibrating like mad too. The name flashing on the screen was Sophia. I stared at the name, watching it insistently pulse and vibrate like a dying insect. The exhilaration that had surged through me was doused in ice water, instantly cooling and settling, transforming into a deeper, colder, crueler pleasure. "Sophia, you got the news too? Your husband, your backer, the biological father of your bastards, he's about to die. How do you feel? Fear? Despair? Like the sky is falling?" I didn't answer right away. I let that shrill ringtone echo again and again through the empty office, like a dirge for Victor, like a slow torture for Sophia. It rang 7 or 8 times before grudgingly stopping. But only a few seconds later, it went at it again, wildly. This time I leisurely picked up the phone, pressed the answer button, and even drawled a slow hello. On the other end, Sophia immediately burst into a heart-rending, utterly altered wail. The sound was so agonized and desperate it was nearly ear-piercing. "Ethan, it's you. Was it you? You devil. What'd you do to Victor? He's dying. The doctor says he's dying. Was it you? Say something. Was it you?" Her voice warped and distorted by extreme fear and rage, rambling incoherently, reduced to hysterical accusations and a breakdown of sobbing. I held the phone, listening quietly, listening to her desperate wails, listening to the sound of her world collapsing. That sound was more pleasing than any beautiful music in the world. The corners of my mouth slowly curled upward, eventually forming a huge, silent, devilish grin. Tears poured uncontrollably from the corners of my eyes, squinted from maniacal laughter, hotly sliding down my cheeks. But I didn't care. I even stuck out my tongue and licked the tears that had trickled to the corner of my mouth. The salty taste stimulated my taste buds, bringing a strange, almost orgasmic pleasure. Haha! I finally laughed out loud, my voice hoarse, thick with nasal sound and an undisguised enormous pleasure. "Sophia." I paused, savoring the instant suffocating silence and heavy gasps from the other end of the line. "What are you crying for?" My voice carried amusement. Light as air, yet like a poisoned ice pick, it plunged into her heart. "Your husband? Well, he isn't completely dead yet." On the other end of the line, Sophia's crying and cursing were abruptly cut off, leaving only deathly silence and heavy, bellows-like gasps. Even through the cold radio waves, I could clearly feel her overwhelming hatred and bone-deep terror. "Ethan, you'll die a miserable death, you—" Her voice was hoarse, carrying curses like bloody foam, but weak as a mosquito's whine. "Shoo!" I blew gently into the mouthpiece, with a creepily tender softness. "Conserve your strength, Sophia. Save those pitiful tears and curses to wail to your Dr. Schmidt." But before that, my voice suddenly went cold, like the Siberian wind. "Take those 3 little bastards you gave birth to and get out of my house. Now, immediately, right this instant." "House! It's ours." She grabbed at the last straw, snapping back in a high voice. "Ours!" I sneered, cutting her off. "The deed has only my name on it. Ethan. The down payment was my parents' life savings. The mortgage has been paid penny by me for the last 10 years. Yours? You, Sophia, and your 3 illegitimate kids whose father nobody knows. What right do you have to say ours?" All that was left on the other end of the line was suppressed, desperate sobbing. "I'll give you 1 hour." I glanced at my watch, my voice flat. 1 hour from now, if I still see any of your garbage left in my house, I'll personally help you clean it out. Believe me, you won't want to see me take action." After saying that, I didn't give her any chance to beg or curse. I hung up the phone. The world was suddenly quiet. Only the news notification on my phone about Victor being critically ill remained glaringly bright. For the next while, I behaved like a calm onlooker. I called the neighborhood management and in a steady tone informed them that my ex-wife, Miss Sophia, was about to move out and asked the security to be on the lookout to avoid unnecessary disputes. The property manager clearly picked up on the undertone and repeatedly agreed to monitor the situation. An hour later, I drove back home. From a distance, I saw an old, small, moving van parked under the building. Sophia was listlessly directing 2 movers in dirty work clothes as they loaded several suitcases and a few cardboard boxes filled with odds and ends onto the truck. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes swollen like peaches, her face so pale it had no color left, and she seemed about to collapse. The 3 children huddled in the corner by the apartment door like frightened quail. Oliver kept his head down, his hands clenching the hem of his clothes. Emma sniffled quietly, her face smudged with dirt. Noah still seemed not to understand what was happening, staring blankly at his mother and the busy workers. My car came to a slow stop. When Sophia saw it, her body went rigid. A sudden surge of hatred and fear flashed in her eyes, and she instinctively tugged the 3 children behind her, as if I were some raging beast. I opened the car door and got out. Without looking at Sophia, my gaze fell directly on the 3 children. They trembled at the sight of me, and Emma buried her face in her brother's arms. I walked toward them step by step. My footsteps sounded unusually loud in the empty hallway. Sophia trembled all over, shielding the children, and with a blustering, fearful snarl she hissed, "Ethan, what do you think you're doing? We'll leave. We'll leave right now." I stopped a few steps away from them. My gaze swept over Oliver, Emma, Noah. Those 3 names, once the most precious symbols in my life, now felt like a stigma branded on my skin. "Don't be nervous," I spoke, my voice low but carrying an unquestionable chill. "I'm just here to inform you of something." My eyes fell on the eldest, Oliver. "Oliver!" Oliver trembled, looking up at me with terror. "From today on, you are no longer Johnson." My voice was clear and cruel. "You are Schmidt." "Oliver." I turned to the other 2 children. "Emma, you're Emma. Noah, you're Noah." Each change of name struck Sophia like a sledgehammer. Her body shook violently, her lips trembled, and she couldn't utter a single word. Only tears poured out silently. The 3 children were stunned too. A change of surname? To them, this was harder to understand than being thrown out of the house and filled with the fear of being completely abandoned. Oliver's fists were clenched so tight his knuckles went white, his eyes full of humiliation and bewilderment. Emma cried even louder. "Do you understand?" I ignored their reactions, my voice cold as I emphasized, "From now on, you are Victor's children and have nothing to do with me, Ethan. Your birth certificates, household registration, anything that says Johnson, I will take care of. From now on, your surname is only Schmidt." After I finished speaking, I didn't look at them again, as if they were nothing but a pile of obstructive garbage. I walked straight to the apartment door, ready to go upstairs and thoroughly clean out that filthy nest. As I passed by Sophia, she suddenly lifted her head. In her tear-soaked, bloodshot eyes burned a nearly insane flame. As if using the last of her strength, she croaked out a hoarse, venomous curse. "Ethan, you'll get what's coming to you. You won't die peacefully. Just wait. The Schmidt family won't let you off. Victor won't let this go for nothing." Smack! A sharp, resounding slap cut her curse off with brutal force. I used all my strength. My palm tingled slightly from the enormous recoil. Sophia's head was struck sharply to one side. 5 clear red finger marks instantly blossomed on her pale face, and a thin line of blood seeped from the corner of her mouth. She was stunned, clutching her face, staring at me in disbelief, her eyes filled with utter terror and despair. Retribution? I leaned close to her, fixing my gaze on her terrified eyes. My voice was pressed very low, but carried a chill-inducing smile. "Sophia, look at yourself now. Look at your lover lying in the ICU waiting to die. And look at the 3 bastard children beside you who don't even have your surname." I reached out a finger and lightly brushed her swollen cheek, my gesture a nauseating kind of tenderness. "Isn't this exactly the retribution you deserved?" And I paused, my smile widening to reveal my pearly teeth. "This is only the beginning." I withdrew my hand, didn't look at her again, and turned to walk through the building entrance. Behind me came Sophia's suppressed, utterly broken wailing, the 3 children's terrified, helpless sobs, mixed with the moving men's impatient urgings, a chaotic, hellish symphony. I climbed the stairs with a light step. The Schmidts? Not letting me go? A dying doctor? A disgraced whore? 3 little bastards? Huh, let them come. My feast of revenge has only just served the first appetizer. Next up is the real main course. Victor ultimately didn't make it through that long night. In the early hours, Sacred Heart Hospital issued a brief and cold obituary. Renowned surgeon Dr. Victor sustained severe accidental injuries during surgery and, despite all resuscitation efforts, unfortunately passed away at X. The hospital expressed deep sorrow and has formed a special team to cooperate with relevant authorities in thoroughly investigating the cause of the incident. The obituary was like a stone thrown into still water, stirring some ripples in the city's medical circles. Regret, speculation, and rumors sprang up. But for Sophia, already nailed to the pillar of shame, and the 3 children whose surnames had just been forcibly changed to Schmidt, this was undoubtedly the final straw that broke the camel's back. Victor was dead. Sophia's greatest support, or rather her last sliver of illusory hope, had been completely shattered. She had lost not only her lover, but also her only possible source of financial and emotional support. Victor may have given her some money while alive, but never much. After all, he needed to maintain his polished image. And he had died so suddenly and so disgracefully that the Schmidts side, if he even had a so-called family left, would likely stay far away, let alone take responsibility for Sophia, his shameful mistress, and the 3 illegitimate children. Sophia was utterly out of options. She, with 3 children, was driven out of my house like a bereft dog. In her haste, she could only rent a tiny, extremely dilapidated room in a mixed-up urban village on the city's edge. Dark, damp, infested with cockroaches, the air forever hung with a mingled stench of cheap cooking oil and garbage. That pitiful bit of savings, after paying rent and moving costs, quickly ran out. She had no job. The picture book library position had fired her after she skipped work for several days following the incident. No skills, and 3 still small children to drag along. Victor was dead, and even that last meager support was gone for good. The pressure of survival, like a heavy mountain, instantly crushed this once refined, vain woman. She began selling off the few valuable things she'd taken from that home, her jewelry, a few decent outfits, even some of the children's toys. But that money was a drop in the bucket against the enormous cost of living. I knew all of this. I didn't need to send people to follow her. Just a little care was enough. I found a local thug in the urban village area called Scarface, a punk who survived by collecting protection fees and running small usurious loans. I gave him a price he couldn't refuse, peanuts to me, to look after the newly moved Sophia and her 3 children. Look after? Scarface, with a cheap cigarette dangling from his mouth, squinted his slanted eyes and flashed a knowing, feral grin. Boss, don't worry. I'll look after them real good, make sure they never forget how good this neighborhood treated him. Then Sophia's nightmare began. The landlord demanding rent became unusually vicious and heartless, threatening to throw their things out if she was even one day late. Buying groceries at the market, she was deliberately harassed and shoved by small-time thugs. She just found a job washing dishes at a fast food place, and in less than 2 days the boss kicked her out for being clumsy and breaking things, without paying her a cent. Even at night, she could hear someone throwing stones at their shabby window, accompanied by lewd insults and ugly laughter. I know Sophia had thought about coming to me, but she didn't dare. That slap and my final words left her with nothing but a bone-deep fear of me. She also tried going to Victor's family. The result was predictable. She was chased off before they even opened the door, and was called a jinx who kills people and a shameless vixen. She was completely abandoned by the world, except for her 3 children. 3 Schmidt children crying out to be fed, needing to go to school, needing shelter from the storm. Hunger, fear, despair gnawed at this once proud woman day and night like venomous snakes. Her last shred of dignity and reserve was ground to dust in the face of survival. A sudden downpour struck the city. Large raindrops pounded the ground, sending up murky splashes that quickly joined into streams. The streets turned muddy, pedestrians hurried, and vehicles drove by, throwing up tall walls of water. By evening the rain had eased somewhat, but the sky remained ominously overcast. I sat by the window, an upscale Western restaurant in the city center, with an elegant steak and a glass of red wine before me. Beyond the huge floor-to-ceiling window was the city's busiest pedestrian street. My gaze wandered aimlessly across the street scene. Then it froze. Under the arch at the entrance of the pedestrian street, on the edge of the crowd, sheltering from the rain, I saw several familiar, filthy figures. Sophia was soaking wet, her thin clothes clinging to her, outlining her gaunt frame. Strands of hair stuck to her pale face, her lips frozen purple. She clutched a few crumpled coins dampened by the rain. Beside her, the 3 children were worse off. Oliver kept his head down, trying to make himself small, holding a worn enamel bowl with only a few scattered coins inside. Emma hugged her younger brother Noah. The 2 little ones curled up on the cold, damp ground, shivering, their faces dirty, their eyes hollow and numb. Noah kept coughing, his little face flushed bright red. They were begging. The once glamorous mistress and the once lively, adorable children now looked like a pile of trash casually thrown into the mud, extending filthy hands to passers-by for a few coins. This scene was more shocking than any carefully staged act of revenge. More satisfying. I lifted the goblet and gently swirled the dark red liquid inside. The cold drink slid down my throat, bringing a sharp, spicy burn. The scene outside the window had become the most delightful accompaniment to my drink. Just then, a well-dressed woman walking a pet dog passed under the arch. The little dog seemed frightened by the children on the ground and started barking furiously at Emma and Noah. The woman frowned in disgust and snapped sharply. Where did these little beggars come from? Get away. Don't scare my baby. Sophia, like a mother beast suddenly awakened, lunged forward and shielded the 2 children with her body, hissing and pleading at the woman. I'm sorry. I am sorry. We're leaving right now. The child is sick. Please, have mercy. Her trembling hand held out the battered bowl toward the woman. Get lost. Filthy. The woman kicked the bowl from Sophia's hand in disgust. The enamel bowl clanged and flew far away, the few coins inside rolling out and dropping into the murky rainwater. Sophia's hand froze in midair. The rebound from the bowl being kicked sent her staggering, nearly falling. She stared dazedly at the coins rolling in the muddy water, then at the haughty woman and the barking little dog, and then at the children beside her trembling with terror and helplessness. The last bit of support completely collapsed. With a plop, she knelt straight down on the cold, filthy, rain-soaked stone pavement. The sound of her knees hitting the ground, through the thick glass window, seemed to reach my ears with uncanny clarity. Please, I'm begging you. Give some money. The child is sick. They're going to starve. Please, have mercy. Give some money, she cried out desperately, her voice hoarse and heartrending, her forehead striking the wet ground with heavy thuds. Mud splashed on her face and hair, leaving her disheveled and miserable like the lowest of ants. Oliver watched his mother kneel and kowtow, humiliated tears mixing with the rain as they fell. He bit his lip so hard he nearly drew blood. Emma held their brother, who wouldn't stop coughing, and cried out in fright. This scene, like a carefully painted oil painting titled Despair, appeared before my eyes with crystal clarity. Soft piano music flowed through the restaurant, warm lights, the aroma of food, and I sat in heaven, admiring the landscape of hell. An indescribable, immense, almost soul-bursting sense of satisfaction and exhilaration, like a surging tide, instantly flooded my limbs and body. Every cell cheered, every nerve trembled. Bliss. Fucking bliss. This was more satisfying than plunging a knife into Victor myself. To see those who once betrayed you, who trampled your dignity underfoot, now kneel in the mud like dogs, wagging their tails and begging for mercy, surrendering all dignity for a few coins. It felt like drinking the richest wine, intoxicating and heavenly. I picked up a napkin and elegantly wiped the corner of my mouth, as if I had just enjoyed a delicious dessert. Then I stood up and adjusted the cuff of my expensive suit. Time to finish things. I pushed open the restaurant's heavy glass door and stepped outside. The damp, cold air mixed with the city's clamor hit me. I ignored the curious and startled glances of passers-by and walked, step by step, calmly toward that archway, toward the despair in the mud. Sophia was still bowing mechanically. Her forehead was swollen, the skin broken, blood seeping and mixing with the mud, filthy. The three children huddled together, looking at me, the suddenly appearing, well-dressed stranger. With fear, I stopped in front of Sophia. The shiny tip of my shoe was only a few centimeters from her mud-covered hand. My shadow loomed over her. She seemed to sense something. The motion of bowing froze abruptly. She very slowly, trembling, lifted her head. When that face, smeared with mud, tears and blood, exhausted and utterly desperate, met my cold, downward gaze, time seemed to stand still. The world in her eyes instantly narrowed to nothing but boundless, suffocating darkness and fear. Her pupils suddenly dilated, her body shaking violently from sheer terror, like a withered leaf about to be torn apart by a gale. Her throat made choking, gasping sounds, but she couldn't form a single word. I looked down at her from above, at the demon-like reflection of myself mirrored in her eyes. Then I slowly crouched down to meet her gaze. There was even a trace of gentle, perfectly measured concern on my face. I reached out and, with my fingertips, extremely softly and carefully wiped away the filthy stains of mud, tears, and blood from her face. The gesture was as tender as if I were cleaning a priceless treasure. My voice was low and clear, carrying a strange, chilling calm that reached her ears and the ears of several onlookers gathered nearby. Sophia. I watched her pupils contract violently with fear, feeling the uncontrollable trembling beneath my fingertips. It's pouring rain. Kneeling here must be so cold. My tone held a trace of reproach and a hint of pity. Like the most attentive husband, the children are still young. What if they catch cold? My fingers glided over her cold cheek, pausing beside the split wound on her temple, gently rubbing it. Don't rush. I tilted my head slightly, the smile on my face deepening, like a demon whispering. Our game between us. This is only just beginning. Sophia trembled under my fingertips like the last leaf in an autumn wind. A choked sob of despair lodged in her throat, but unable to make sound. She looked at the smile on my face, tender to the extreme. Her eyes hollow like two dried wells, containing only boundless terror and deathly silence. She knew the real nightmare was far from over. I stood up, the tip of my cold leather shoe grinding over a filthy coin in the muddy water before her with a faint creak. Without giving her another glance, I turned and plunged back into the bright lights and crowds of the bustling city, leaving that curled-up despair in the shadow of the archway completely behind me. Scarface took care of things very thoroughly. Sophia and her three children were barely surviving in that dilapidated little room in the urban village, as if living in a hell on earth. The landlord's insults, the thug's harassment, the neighbors' scornful looks, and finger-pointing became the background noise of their lives. The only work Sophia could find were the lowest, filthiest, least-paying jobs, washing dishes all night in stinking back kitchens, her hands swollen and sore from poor-quality detergent. Hauling goods at the wholesale market before dawn, heavy vegetable crates bending her back, even cleaning and unclogging sewers for others. Every penny soaked in blood, tears, and humiliation. That meager income was just enough to keep them teetering on the line of hunger. The three children had long lost their former innocence and liveliness. Oliver, formerly Oliver Johnson, was silent like a shadow, his eyes gloomy, having learned early to rummage through trash for plastic bottles and cardboard to sell. Emma Johnson, had become skeletal like a bean sprout, her eyes full of terror and numbness, often holding little Noah Johnson, who coughed constantly and had recurring fevers, staring blankly in the cold rental room. Noah's illness was like a heavy mountain pressing the breath out of Sophia. With no money for the hospital, she could only rely on the cheapest fever reducers and antibiotics, the child's coughing echoing hollowly at night like a countdown of life slipping away. Scarface appeared at the right moment. He had a cigarette dangling from his mouth, slanting his gaze at Sophia's cracked lips and the children's sallow faces, sizing them up like livestock. "This pathetic as hell." He blew out a smoke ring, his tone full of false sympathy. "I can't just stand by. Here's a tip for you." A calculating light gleamed in his slanted eyes. "Over by the train station, they're short a few helpers. Your two older ones, they're pretty quick with their hands, right? Go check out people's luggage, pick up stuff. Could pull in a few dozen bucks a day for food. Better than starving, huh?" Sophia's face went as white as paper in an instant. She knew exactly what Scarface meant by check out and pick up. He wanted her underage children to work as pickpockets. No, the children can't. She instinctively shielded them behind her, her voice hoarse as she refused. "No." Scarface sneered, kicking over a pile of scavenged, empty bottles in the corner. They crashed with a harsh clatter. "Then are you going to wait to starve to death? Or wait for that sickly kid to cough himself to death?" He pointed at Noah, curled in the tattered cotton, his little face flushed from fever. Sophia's body shook violently. Looking at her weakly breathing little son in her arms, at the two older children beside her whose eyes were green with hunger, the last of her maternal resistance was utterly crushed by the desperate need to survive. She bit her lower lip until she tasted blood, and finally, in despair, closed her eyes. Tears mixed with the grime on her face and rolled down. Scarface laughed with satisfaction, like a hyena watching its prey fall into a trap. So, under the leadership of Scarface's men, Oliver and Emma, the brother and sister who once learned in bright classrooms and played in warm homes, began to haunt the bustling crowds of the train station like ghosts. Their small bodies were wrapped in dirty, oversized old clothes. Their eyes darted like two frightened mice. Under the watch of Scarface's men's fierce gazes, they trembled as they reached out their filthy little hands toward travelers' backpacks carelessly set at their feet, toward forgotten phones on the ticket counter. Once, twice, fear and shame gradually gave way to numbness. They became, in the eyes of the hurried travelers of the train station, the most inconspicuous and most loathed gray scenery, thieves. Noah's illness worsened. A persistent cough turned into wheezing. The little chest heaved violently, like a worn bellows. The medicine Sophia bought with the last of her money was like a drop in the ocean. The child burned and drifted in and out of consciousness, his small face taking on an ominous bluish-purple hue. When Scarface appeared at the door of the rented room for the last time, Noah no longer had the strength to cry. Only faint, intermittent gasps remained. "Damn it, bad luck." Scarface clapped a hand over his nose and looked with disgust at the dying child on the bed. "This brat's a goner. Throw him out. Avoid infection. He's a money sink anyway. The sooner he dies, the sooner he can be reborn." "No." Sophia let out a piercing wail and lunged like a she-wolf to shield her child. Please save him. I'll kowtow to you. I'll be your servant. Save my child." She truly threw caution to the wind and began to bow, her forehead striking the cold, hard concrete with loud thuds. Scarface just looked on coldly, his eyes without a flicker. "Save him? With what? Do you have money? I'm not running a charity." He spat. "If he's going to die, don't die in this place. I'd have to get someone to clean it up. Get him out of here." With that, he cussed and slammed the door as he left. The cold door panel cut off Sophia's last hope. She collapsed to the ground, clutching her feverish, shallow-breathing little son, and let out a despairing, ultimate keening. Oliver and Emma huddled in a corner, watching in terror, their faces streaked with numb tears. A few days later, beside the village dump, there was a small, cold body wrapped in a tattered blanket. No one knew who he was, and no one cared, treated like real garbage. Noah's brief, painful life, like a candle in the wind, was extinguished without sound. Sophia's world plunged completely into a lightless abyss. She went mad, or was at least close to it. She muttered to herself all day, crying and screaming at the air, and at times letting out hair-raising, eerie laughter. Scarface had completely lost interest. A madman with nothing left to exploit wasn't even worthy of being used as a petty thief. He stopped showing up. Oliver and Emma, like two young beasts utterly abandoned, dragged their mentally dazed, half-insane mother and wandered the corners of the city, rummaging through trash cans for anything to fill their stomachs, becoming the very bottom, true beggars of this city. I knew all of this. Scarface would periodically report progress to me, using his crude yet vivid language to describe the tragic plight of Sophia and her children, especially the news of Noah's death. Each report was like pouring me a glass of fine wine. Finally, on an early autumn evening, I went myself to the area near the city village landfill where Noah was buried. The air was thick with the sour stench of rotting garbage and the acrid smell of burning plastic. The afterglow of the setting sun gilded this filthy place with a false, desolate rim of gold. From afar, I could already see them. Sophia was curled up beside a huge, fetid green dumpster, wrapped in a tattered cotton quilt scavenged from who knows which pile of trash. Her hair was a clump of dead grass. Her face so filthy her features were indistinguishable, only a pair of hollow eyes staring up at the gray sky, her mouth making meaningless huff-huff sounds. Not far from her, Oliver and Emma squatted by a fast food container reeking of rot, digging at the remnants of long-spoiled food with their hands and shoveling it into their mouths. Their clothes were in tatters, exposed skin caked with filth and frostbite, their gazes numb and vacant, like the walking dead. A perfect finale backdrop. I stopped the car, opened the trunk. There was no luggage inside, only a neatly wrapped square gift box. I took out the box and tore off the wrapping. Inside was a heavy, leather-bound family album with gold embossed lettering. On the cover was a high-definition photo of that family portrait oil painting I had ripped from the living room wall and later thrown into a corner. In the picture, Sophia and I were smiling brightly and happily, the three children curled up against us with innocent, adorable faces. The background was a cozy home. Below the photo was a line of script. Ethan and Sophia, 10 years of love. How ironic. What a perfect offering. I took the album and walked to a relatively clean patch of abandoned concrete a short distance from Sophia and her children. The setting sun stretched my shadow long. I didn't look at them, as if they were nothing more than an insignificant backdrop in this junkyard. I took out a lighter. The silver metal casing reflected a cold sheen in the sunset. Click. The crisp sound was especially clear at the edge of the silent dump. Pale blue flames leapt, greedily licking the hard leather cover of that exquisite photo album. The fire hesitated for a moment, then, as if having found the most delicious fuel, surged upward with a sudden burst. It crackled happily. The gilded lettering warped and blackened in the flames. That family portrait, a symbol of false happiness, quickly curled, yellowed, and blackened under the intense heat. The smiling faces of Sophia and me were swallowed and twisted by the flames, eventually turning to ash. The three children's smiles, too, disappeared bit by bit in the orange-red blaze. The firelight danced, reflected on my expressionless face, shadows flickering. A wave of heat hit me, carrying the distinct acrid smell of burning paper and leather. The scent was unpleasant, even a little choking, but inside my chest, it was as if those flames had been lit. An indescribable, immense, volcanic surge of burning flooded through my limbs and bones, violently assaulting me. It was an ultimate, exhilarating release, a pleasure that utterly incinerated 10 years of humiliation, deception, and pain. More intoxicating than the strongest liquor, more intense than the highest rapture. Burn, burn well, burn this false past, burn this filthy betrayal, burn this bone-deep pain, along with the traces of those three bastards' existence. Burn them all to ash. Awesome. Fucking awesome. The flames grew fiercer, utterly devouring the entire photo album, snapping and crackling more violently. Orange tongues of fire greedily licked at the cool evening air like a bizarre, gorgeous flower of death blooming on the ruins. The The scorching air distorted the view before me and warped the three shadowy figures curled beside a pile of trash not far away. In the firelight, Sophia's hollow eyes seemed startled by the sudden brightness. She turned her head extremely slowly and stiffly. Her dim, lifeless pupils drifted toward the flames on my side in a dazed way. Her gaze seemed to pass through the leaping flames and fall on my face. That face, lit by the firelight and slightly distorted by overwhelming pleasure. Time seemed to freeze in that instant. In her pupils, there was no hatred, no grievance, not even fear. Only a dead water-like, utter void. That void was more chilling than the deepest curse. But I didn't care anymore. A few sparks leaped from the burning photo album, carrying their last warmth, and drifted down onto the cold concrete. They struggled for a moment and were quickly extinguished, leaving only a faint wisp of bluish smoke that vanished in the bleak, late autumn wind, as if they had never existed. The flames gradually subsided and finally went out. Only a small pile of blackened, curled-edged ashes remained, spinning slightly in the cold evening breeze. I stood where I was and took a deep breath. The air still held the heat of the flames and the scent of ash, mingled with the ubiquitous stench of the dump. Yet as this smell filled my lungs, it brought an unprecedented, utterly clarifying, almost rebirth-like exhilaration. It's over. It's all over. I turned away, no longer looking at that patch of ash, and no longer looking at the three filthy shadows by the trash heap, as if the world had utterly forgotten them. I walked toward my car with steady steps and a straight back. I opened the door and sat in the driver's seat. The leather seat wrapped around me, warm and comfortable. The scent of leather and fragrance filled the car, out of step with the world outside. The engine gave a low roar and started smoothly. I pressed the accelerator. The car slowly drove away from that filthy wasteland, away from the terminus that symbolized all the pain and humiliation of the past 10 years. Outside the window, the city's neon lights came on one after another, a glittering, colorful web woven grandly and coldly. In the rearview mirror, that burned-out lot grew smaller and more blurred, along with the three dark shapes curled by the trash bin, until they finally vanished into the bright yet indifferent city lights. My face showed no expression, no sorrow, no emptiness, not the slightest ripple, only an absolute, deathly calm. And that deeply etched in the eyes, like a brand, the never-dying embers of a flame. I slightly curled the corners of my mouth. Go home.